Hey everybody, welcome to Slash Bash, where today I am bringing you another proRevenge Reddit video. If you are new to the channel, then subscribe, and click on notifications so you don't miss out on the fun. In our first story, when a manager bullies our OP for several months, he never expected it would end with him losing his job. Let's jump right in. This happened around 2016. At the time, I was 25 or 26 and I'm a male. I'd been without a job for a while, looking for a better paying job than I had before, and I found one at a camera security company that was looking to hire someone for the service desk. I went for an interview and got a call back later that day. If I wanted the job, it was mine. Now, my new manager was an ex-military, specifically ex-army, not American, just pointing that out. He really didn't like having people disagree with or going against him, a thing I was very unaware of when I took the job. For 2 to 3 months, everything was going well. The manager was cordial and seemed to really enjoy having me there. I worked my butt off every day, as the software we were working with was unknown to me, so I studied a lot and even went overseas to another country to follow a course and succeeded on my exams. However, after that period, my grandpa, who was like a second father to me, suddenly was hospitalized after a brain bleed. I think it's an aneurysm. He was found in the shower. He had collapsed after he pressed his panic button. He lives in assisted living. This all happened on a Wednesday. The family came together in the hospital several times to show support and see my grandpa. However, on Friday afternoon, 3 p.m., I was called up by my father, my grandpa's son, while I was at work, and he explained to me that grandpa had passed away. I was in tears on the phone and in utter shock. It took me a while to calm down. I went to my manager and explained what just happened and that I'm going home to be with my family. However, that day there was an event. The company was doing a charity event, and this charity was going to be public news. They already announced the amount of people participating, and it would look bad if they were down a person. It was basically just for good PR. So he refused to let me go. I told him that by law he cannot deny me, as my contract states I can take a day for a death in the family, and that I was leaving now. That was the turning point. He went from a nice manager to a manager from hell. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. I was told he couldn't believe I was in this line of work for 6 years and be this bad at my job. He cussed me out and ridiculed me in front of my colleagues and even clients. This all continued for several months and severely began to impact my mental health. I had a talk with my parents and my fiance, at the time still my girlfriend, and they basically told me that this was not okay, that I didn't have to take this and that I should give them my 2 weeks notice. I agreed. The following day, I went to HR and explained why I was leaving the company, and that I couldn't stand the idea of working even a single day more with that excuse of a human being. HR showed interest in my well-being, and even more importantly in what I was claiming about my manager. They had received more complaints about him, but nobody had proof of his wrongdoings. So they asked me if I had proof. I told them I'd be looking for a new job, but I'd gladly fit in the time to collect all I could. For the next 2 weeks, I collected everything. Memos, emails, voice recordings. When on the phone, the calls are automatically recorded, and the dumb butt was stupid enough to cuss me out while I was on the phone. Lucky me. Also lucky was that my colleagues at the desk had my back this entire time. They'd been trying to cheer me up, saying I was doing fine work and that they also didn't understand this man's behavior. So when I came by and asked if they'd mind signing a document that everything I stated in the paperwork was the truth, they gladly did so. I had one last talk with HR and him at the same time the last day I was there. Before he even walked in, I told the HR person who was mediating, he's going to walk in, say what he wants to say, and I'll be quiet and listen. When he's done, I'll explain my side and he's going to interrupt me, tell you I'm lying, and talk about completely non-related subject matter to drag the conversation another direction. She looked surprised at my comment, but had no time to respond as Mr. Army Man walked in and began his spiel. Exactly as I stated, he'd blurt his side out, and once I tried to talk, he'd consistently interrupt me and try to pick fights. Eventually, I got up, told HR, "I told you so. Here's the documents you've been asking for." I placed a filled folder with several dozens of emails, plenty of memos, and a USB containing 3 phone conversations, and even video footage of him yelling at me. In both voice and video recordings, you could easily hear him cuss me out. I gave the manager a big bright smile, who was smirking victoriously, and said to him, "I don't think you'll be smirking like that for long. Enjoy your little victory." His smirk disappeared into a confused scowl, but I slammed the door on him before he could respond and left the building, feeling like a huge, and I mean humongous-sized, planet-sized amount of stress fell off my shoulders. Within a month, I was back to my old self. 2 months later, I was working at a new job, and out of curiosity, I checked my ex-manager's LinkedIn. Unemployed. I called one of my old colleagues to ask what exactly went down. My proof opened Pandora's box. He was being disrespectful to the female staff, insulting the older staff, and on multiple occasions was less than cordial with our external hires. None of these complaints were acted upon because it was his word against theirs and there was no proof. However, me providing overwhelming proof of his gross behavior towards me made all the other complaints now be taken as fact. He was fired less than a month after I left, and they refused to provide him with any form of reference. In a field like his, references mean a lot, so not getting one from a company you worked at for nearly a year is a huge red flag. Now it's 2020, 4 years passed, and according to LinkedIn, he's still not working in his field. I'll gladly admit that I remember this every once in a while, and each time I feel rather wickedly satisfied. In story number 2, our OP takes things into her own hands to try and break her mom's habit of gossiping. My mom had a fairly consistent habit of gossiping and sharing quite personal information around. We knew she was doing it, but she would adamantly deny having ever done such a thing. I wish I could remember what she did that finally made me snap. It can't even have been that important. It was just the millionth time, and for once I wanted her to admit what she'd done and know that we knew too. So we set up the sting. My friend Jane and I approached my mom and told her that Jane was pregnant. She wasn't ready to tell her mom yet, and she was really worried what people would think about her having a baby so young. She didn't want anyone to know yet, so it had to be kept top secret. Having set the trap, I figured within a few weeks or so I would have some evidence we could use, but I was so wrong. The very next day, my sister, grandma, and neighbor all asked me how my young pregnant friend was doing. When I was asked by a lady who worked at the supermarket that same day, I figured this had gone far enough and went home to confront my mom, only to have my dad ask how Jane was doing. I confronted my mom right there in front of my dad, which is when she started with the usual, "I would never do that. They must have heard from someone else" routine. I explained very shortly and clearly that we had fed her a lie to see how far it spread, and the reaction was glorious. My mom's mouth fell open and she just had nothing to say at all. My dad, on the other hand, fell back on the sofa, roaring with laughter, bemoaning the fact he hadn't thought of this years ago. It was a moment I will treasure forever, and the point was thoroughly made. Now that my mom was aware of what had happened, I was able to satisfy all further inquiries towards my friend's health with the true story, and my mom's audience for any further gossip was somewhat reduced. In story number 3, they tore up Granddad's garden too many times. Finally, Granddad decided to put an end to it. My dad told me this story a few years back. My grandfather lived in a really rural area in Georgia. This was around the late 1930s, early 1940s. My grandfather owned a farm and had a garden. He had planted various veggies. Well, the only neighbors were about a mile away, and for some reason, the neighbors would drive their Model T through the garden, tearing up the veggies. My grandpa would have to replant the garden. The neighbors kept doing this. So here comes the revenge part. My grandfather dug holes around the garden and stuck metal poles into the holes. He covered up the holes with leaves. A few days later, the neighbors drove through again. My dad said they tore the undercarriage out and had parts strewn all over the place. He couldn't remember what happened after that, but I don't think they did that again. This is John from Slash Bash. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video and want to see more of them, then please hit that subscribe button. We'd love for you to drop a like, share it with your friends, and we will see you in the next one.